The palace did not shudder at the shouting. It trembled in the silence. 5 minutes after the royal family received the confidential confirmation, Prince William and Catherine's announcement caught everyone off guard. The family had to have critical conversations about survival, succession, and duty due to King Charles's catastrophic health deterioration. What began as a private medical update became the monarchy's public moment of distress. Before we get into more detail about what this truly means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates. Something deeper had already broken long before the general public heard those words. William was slow. As a result, it became worse. He didn't waver, tremble, or collapse beneath the pressure. He looked at the declaration as though it were a verdict that divided his life into before and after, rather than just a piece of paper. Additionally, Catherine did not give words of comfort or interject. She stayed close enough to notice the shift in him, but far enough away to let him handle the initial shock on his own. The quiet between them was not hollow. It was insightful. It was horrifying, because they both understood that health was no longer the only factor. This is related to the crown beginning to move. The announcement subtly added, senior royal duties will be urgently reviewed. But it wasn't quiet. It seemed precise, surgical, and dangerous. Because that one line wasn't just a suggestion of change, it demonstrated it. It meant that there was no response from the palace. It was preparing for a reality that no one was ready to accept in public. William read that phrase twice. It was that he understood it, not that he didn't. And accepting that meant accepting that there was nothing that could be altered. His grip tightened and then loosened, as if his body were rejecting reality before succumbing to it. Then there was the absence. Charles was not there in the room. It didn't seem like an accident. It was symbolic. The man who had always been central to every decision. Not present, not physically removed, but relocated silently. And that silence was seized by something terrifying. Because when the monarch is not there in his own time, the message becomes louder than any declaration could possibly be. Something had changed behind the palace walls. Something that was impossible to twist, soften, or control. The briefing was controlled, cautious, and measured, and it was given with professional accuracy by the medical consultants. But even in that safe place, the message had dropped like a crack. It wasn't a rumor. This was not speculation. This functioned as confirmation, formally. Finally, William did not react in a prince-like fashion either. He reacted like a son trying not to cry before the world had even had time to process the news. Catherine saw it immediately, the man trying to stay still while losing ground beneath him, not the future king. Orders came in quickly after that. Quiet instructions, controlled movement, no leaks, and no informal language. The palace did not want to panic. It wanted to rule. But control was already slipping through the cracks, because the moment William spoke, the story no longer belonged to the palace. It belonged to everyone. That's when the real pressure began. What came next, not the announcement. There was a lack of coherence in the reactions that took place there. They shattered. William could not put down the weight. It was like a warning. Catherine took her place without advancing, keeping a careful balance between control and might. In a way, Camilla's complete lack of public response said it all. In circumstances such as these, quiet offers no safety. It clarifies it. And it revealed something deeper than melancholy. It revealed loneliness. Then the inevitable memory arrived. Windsor, that dinner, the moment when everything started to fall apart. It was a simple evening that suddenly seemed complicated. No cameras, no headlines. Charles grabbed for his drink, stopped mid-sentence, and turned to William, causing the room to freeze. It wasn't really dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. At the same time, everyone felt that something had gone awry. He tried to continue. As a result, it became worse. He delivered one more phrase before pausing once more, and this second pause, longer, heavier, and unavoidable, said more than any diagnosis could. William was the first to respond, and he did it firmly as opposed to impulsively or emotionally. The chair suddenly pulled back, not to draw attention, but to act, and that's when things began to change. Not announced, not declared, just begun. Dinner was over early. Again, there was silence, no explanation, no guarantee, but this time it was out of control. It was damaged. An immediate medical review was conducted. It is neither a precaution nor a choice. That subtle behind-closed-door decision was the real turning moment. It meant that instead of inquiring whether anything was incorrect, the palace now wanted to know how much of it could be hidden. Later, Catherine saw William standing by himself, staring at a locked door without moving or saying anything, as though he already knew that whatever was behind it would change everything. She also didn't say anything. She didn't need to because she had personally seen and experienced it. The time spent at the table had not been brief. It had been a warning, a line was crossed, and choices were already being made inside the palace without being announced. Plans were revised, schedules were changed, and duties were discreetly reallocated, unmistakably, yet not publicly or formally, because the monarchy is no longer responding when it begins to change in silence. It's evolving. The most frightening part was that nobody was predicting how far it would go or who would survive. And that change happened without waiting for approval. The instant the family entered the same room with the truth between them, it accelerated like a knife that could cut through all the layers of loyalty they believed to be impenetrable. Because this was no longer only due to illness. This has to do with who was gradually beginning to take control. Camilla didn't think twice. She was unable to. The time required answers, and she was the first to demand them. Why was she excluded from the news-making process? Why were William and Catherine at the center of this important matter? Why did it appear that decisions had been made before she was informed? They weren't just questions. These accusations were veiled in disbelief. Charles did not immediately interrupt her, and within that silence, everything was said. No championship could conceal the fact that he was exhausted, not vanquished, but stretched thin. William, on the other hand, neither advanced nor retreated. He remained close to the entrance, as if he were watching over more than just a room, safeguarding the future. Because Camilla was only starting to understand what he did, being excluded had nothing to do with it. It was about being swapped out during the most important times. She didn't speak gently when she mentioned that Charles appeared weak as a result of the announcement. William's response was milder, but far more ominous as they resonated. He didn't speak out. He was not required to. He asserted that if they had kept reality a secret, they would have come to be seen as callous. And in such a case, cruelty would ruin more than honesty. Catherine saw that it was becoming worse before anyone else did. Grief was no longer the only source of tension. It was becoming a game of blame. Furthermore, guilt does not remain contained within a monarchy. It spreads, it shatters. She didn't move loudly or dramatically, just enough to keep the room from collapsing. She gently and firmly reminded them that Charles was still there, listening, and human behind all of their disagreements. That reminder forced everyone to confront the reality they were avoiding, even though nothing changed as a result. This was not a strategy. This was suffering in real time. Then Charles spoke with something much more unnerving than authority or command: assurance. He affirmed what no one had wanted to hear out loud. Rather than choosing William and Catherine because they were convenient or available, he had chosen them to make the news because he believed they could bear the weight of the truth. The decision did not merely settle the disagreement. Because trust turned into power at that precise instant, the balance was irreversibly altered. Camilla immediately understood it, not emotionally. In terms of structure, it was a different place. The center had moved. And when Charles quietly revealed that some responsibilities were already being reviewed and redistributed, there was more silence than before. This wasn't preparation anymore. Transition had already begun. It didn't seem like William was winning. He appeared to be receiving something he had never requested at a time when he was unable to refuse it. Outside the room, the machinery had already started to whirl. Schedules have been revised, engagements have been redistributed, and decision-making has changed. Definitely, but not in a formal or boisterous manner. William stared over pages that were more than simply designs as he sat in front of the task folder. They served as signals. Each line marked a place where Charles might not stand. The future is getting closer with each change. Catherine could see why he hesitated, since there didn't seem to be enough electricity to proceed. It was similar to accountability disguising itself as loss. But the most disturbing development wasn't brought about by the paperwork. It came from something far more muted. Camilla had previously received decisions first, but now she saw that William was getting them before her. At that moment, there was no need to explain. Information was not required, it was proof. The building was beginning to reorganize around a new center already. Charles, who remained there and continued to watch, was the one who allowed it to occur. By the next morning, the palace had ceased to ask questions, it was reacting. Staff members moved differently, conversations were shorter, and there was stress in every hallway that nobody wanted to acknowledge. The world's perception of what it saw beyond the walls had already been formed. This was more than just devastating news. This was the beginning of an irreversible trend. As he saw the reaction unfold and heard his own words repeated in headlines and displays, William became aware of something disquieting. When he spoke, he did more than just deliver news. He took on a role that was prepared for him. And Catherine had done more than just support him by standing behind him. She had stabilized him in a moment that was supposed to break him. Charles was still in the middle, somewhere behind closed doors, but he was no longer in the front, still the king. The logo doesn't change, but I'm no longer carrying everything by myself. Because whether or not the shift was expressed or acknowledged in public, it has already happened. The fact that there was no ceremony when it arrived was the most dangerous feature. Its quiet arrival was a result of choices, silence, and trusting new people, and no one knows when it will end.